What if I told you that the most powerful response to injustice isn't revenge, isn't confrontation, but something far more profound? Carl Jung, one of history's greatest minds, understood something that most of us struggle with every single day. He knew that sometimes the wisest action is no action at all. Sometimes the most devastating response is silence. Think about the last time someone wronged you. Maybe a colleague took credit for your work. Maybe a friend betrayed your trust. Maybe someone spread lies about you behind your back. Your first instinct was probably to fight back, to defend yourself, to make them pay. But what if Jung was right when he said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves? What if the universe has a far more elegant way of handling these situations? Today, we're going to explore 7 specific scenarios where staying silent and letting karma do its work isn't just the wise choice, it's the only choice that leads to true peace and ultimate justice. But here's the thing, this isn't about being passive or weak. This is about understanding the deeper psychological and spiritual laws that govern human behavior. Laws that Jung spent his entire life studying. By the end of this video, you'll understand why silence can be more powerful than any argument, why patience can be more devastating than any revenge, and why sometimes the universe's justice is far more precise than anything we could ever devise ourselves. Let's start with the first situation where silence becomes your greatest weapon. When someone tries to provoke you into an emotional reaction, picture this: someone is deliberately pushing your buttons. They're saying things they know will hurt you, making comments designed to trigger your anger, your insecurity, your fear. Every fiber of your being wants to lash out, to put them in their place, to show them they can't treat you this way. But here's what Jung understood that most people don't. The person trying to provoke you is revealing far more about themselves than they are about you. Jung wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But he also understood the flip side of this truth. When someone is desperately trying to get an emotional reaction from you, they're actually projecting their own inner turmoil onto you. They're in pain, they're struggling with their own demons, and they're trying to make you feel as miserable as they do. The moment you react emotionally, you've given them exactly what they want. You've validated their strategy. You've proven that they have power over you. But when you stay silent, when you remain calm and centered, something fascinating happens. The energy they're putting out into the world has nowhere to go. It bounces back to them with compound interest. This isn't just spiritual mumbo-jumbo. This is psychological reality. People who constantly try to provoke others are usually dealing with deep-seated insecurity, unresolved trauma, or profound dissatisfaction with their own lives. When their provocation tactics don't work, when they can't get the reaction they're desperately seeking, they're forced to confront the emptiness within themselves. I've seen this play out countless times. The office bully who constantly makes snide remarks eventually finds themselves isolated and alone because everyone gets tired of their negativity. The family member who always tries to start drama at gatherings eventually gets excluded from those gatherings. The friend who always tries to make you feel bad about your success eventually finds themselves with no friends at all. Your silence in these moments isn't just protecting your own peace of mind, it's allowing the natural consequences of their behavior to unfold. Jung understood that the psyche has its own immune system, its own way of protecting itself from toxic influences. When you don't feed the toxic dynamic, it eventually starves itself to death. When someone spreads lies or gossip about you, this one is perhaps the hardest to sit with. When someone is out there destroying your reputation, spreading lies about you, twisting your words, every instinct screams at you to defend yourself. You want to set the record straight. You want everyone to know the truth. You want to expose the liar for who they really are. But Jung had a profound insight about this situation. He said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The people who truly matter in your life, the people whose opinions actually count, they know who you are. They've seen your character in action. They're not going to believe lies about you because those lies don't match their lived experience of you. The people who do believe the lies, they either don't know you well enough for their opinion to matter, or they're the type of people who enjoy drama and gossip, which means their judgment is already compromised. Either way, these aren't people whose respect you need or want. But here's where karma comes in, and it's more precise than you could ever imagine. People who make a habit of spreading lies and gossip are essentially poisoning their own well. They're training everyone around them to distrust what they say. They're establishing themselves as unreliable narrators of reality. I know someone who spent years spreading rumors about others in their workplace. At first, people listened. But over time, colleagues began to notice a pattern. This person always had drama, always had stories about how others were treating them badly, always had some new conspiracy to share. Eventually, people stopped believing anything they said. When this person actually needed support, when they actually had a legitimate complaint, nobody took them seriously because they had cried wolf too many times. The universe has a way of handling liars that's far more effective than anything you could do by defending yourself. When you stay silent and let your actions speak for themselves, you allow the truth to emerge naturally over time. Meanwhile, the liar is busy digging their own grave, destroying their own credibility with every false story they tell. Jung understood that truth has a weight to it, a substance that lies simply don't possess. Truth doesn't need to be defended. It defends itself. Lies, on the other hand, require constant maintenance, constant elaboration, constant energy to sustain. Eventually, that house of cards always collapses. When someone takes credit for your work or ideas, this situation is incredibly common in our competitive world, and it's perhaps one of the most infuriating experiences you can have. You pour your heart, your creativity, your intelligence into something, and then someone else swoops in and claims it as their own. The injustice feels overwhelming. You want to scream from the rooftops, "That was my idea. I did that work." But Jung had a fascinating perspective on this type of theft. He believed that creativity and true innovation come from something deeper than the ego, from what he called the collective unconscious. He said, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity." When someone steals your work or ideas, they're stealing the external form, but they can't steal the source. They can't steal your creativity, your unique perspective, your ability to generate new ideas. They've taken one fish, but they can't take your ability to fish. More importantly, people who habitually take credit for others' work are revealing something profound about themselves. They don't believe in their own creative abilities. They don't trust that they can generate something valuable on their own. This is actually a form of psychological poverty that karma addresses in a very specific way. First, stolen ideas never fit quite right on the thief. It's like wearing someone else's clothes. People can sense that something is off, even if they can't put their finger on what it is. The person presenting the stolen work lacks the deep understanding that comes from actually creating it. They can't answer detailed questions about it. They can't build on it effectively. They can't adapt it when circumstances change. Second, people who steal credit become dependent on theft. They never develop their own creative muscles because they're always looking for someone else's work to appropriate. Over time, this creates a kind of creative atrophy. They become less and less capable of original thought, more and more desperate to find new sources to steal from. I've watched this play out in corporate environments many times. The manager who takes credit for their team's ideas might get promoted in the short term, but eventually, their lack of genuine insight becomes apparent. They can't replicate their supposed success. They can't lead effectively because they never actually understood what made the original ideas work. Meanwhile, the person whose work was stolen continues to generate new ideas, continues to grow and develop, continues to build a reputation for genuine creativity and insight. The thief gets one moment of stolen glory. The creator gets a lifetime of authentic achievement. When you stay silent in these situations, you're not just avoiding a potentially messy confrontation. You're allowing the natural order to reassert itself. You're trusting that authenticity will ultimately triumph over imitation. That substance will ultimately outweigh superficiality. When someone betrays your trust in a relationship, betrayal in relationships cuts deeper than almost any other form of harm because it attacks something fundamental, our ability to trust and connect with others. Whether it's a romantic partner who cheats, a friend who shares your secrets, or a family member who breaks a promise, betrayal feels like a wound to the soul. Jung understood betrayal as a shadow phenomenon. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The person who betrays you is acting out their own shadow, their own unresolved darkness. They're not just hurting you, they're revealing the parts of themselves they haven't been willing to face. Your first instinct might be to expose their betrayal, to make sure everyone knows what they did, to get revenge by hurting them the way they hurt you. But Jung would say that this reaction, while understandable, keeps you trapped in the same dark energy that motivated their betrayal in the first place. When you stay silent and step back from the situation, you allow several powerful forces to work. First, you preserve your own integrity. You don't become the kind of person who betrays others, even when you've been betrayed yourself. You maintain your moral high ground, not through superiority, but through consistency with your own values. Second, you allow the betrayer to face the full weight of their actions without distraction. When you don't retaliate, when you don't create drama around the betrayal, they can't focus on your reaction instead of their own behavior. They're forced to sit with what they've done, to confront the gap between their actions and their values. Third, you create space for the natural consequences to unfold. People who betray others don't just betray once. It's usually a pattern. The person who cheated on you will likely cheat on their next partner. The friend who shared your secrets will probably share someone else's secrets. The family member who broke their promise to you will probably break promises to others. But here's where karma gets really interesting. Betrayers often end up in a prison of their own making. They become paranoid that others will betray them. The way they betrayed others, they struggle to form deep, meaningful relationships because they can't trust others to be more loyal than they themselves have been. They live in constant fear that their past betrayals will be discovered, that their reputation will be ruined. I know someone who had an affair and left their spouse for the other person. For years afterward, they were consumed with paranoia that their new partner would cheat on them the way they had cheated on their spouse. They couldn't enjoy their new relationship because they were constantly looking for signs of betrayal. They had created their own psychological hell. When you stay silent after betrayal, you're not condoning the behavior or being weak. You're trusting that the universe has a way of teaching people lessons that go deeper than any punishment you could devise. You're choosing to break the cycle of harm rather than perpetuating it. When someone tries to manipulate or control you, manipulation is perhaps one of the most insidious forms of harm because it attacks your sense of reality, your ability to trust your own perceptions and judgments. Manipulators use guilt, fear, obligation, and confusion to get you to do what they want, often without you even realizing what's happening. Jung understood manipulation as a power dynamic rooted in psychological immaturity. He said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But manipulators don't want transformation. They want control. They want to change you without changing themselves. The manipulator in your life might be a romantic partner who uses emotional blackmail to get their way, a family member who guilts you into doing things you don't want to do, or a colleague who uses passive-aggressive tactics to make you doubt yourself. Your instinct might be to argue with them, to point out their manipulative behavior, to try to make them see reason. But here's what Jung understood. Manipulation only works when there's someone willing to be manipulated. When you argue with a manipulator, you're still playing their game. You're still giving them the emotional reaction they're looking for. You're still allowing them to control the dynamic. When you stay silent and simply don't participate in their manipulation, something powerful happens. The manipulation loses its power. It's like trying to play tennis against someone who won't hit the ball back. The game simply can't continue. Manipulators rely on your emotional investment in the relationship, your desire to please, your fear of conflict, your guilt, your sense of obligation. When you stay silent and step back, you're removing the fuel that powers their manipulation. You're forcing them to confront the fact that their tactics aren't working. And here's where karma comes in. Manipulative people are usually deeply insecure and afraid. They manipulate others because they don't believe they can get their needs met through honest, direct communication. They don't trust that people will choose to be with them or help them unless they're forced or tricked into it. When their manipulation doesn't work, they're forced to face these deeper fears and insecurities. They have to confront the possibility that their relationships are built on false foundations. They have to deal with the loneliness that comes from never having authentic connections with others. Over time, manipulative people often find themselves increasingly isolated. People get tired of being manipulated. They start to recognize the patterns, to see through the tactics. They begin to avoid the manipulator or to put up stronger boundaries. I've seen manipulative parents lose their adult children. Manipulative Partners find themselves alone. Manipulative colleagues find themselves excluded from important projects and decisions. The very control they were trying to exert slips through their fingers like water. When you stay silent in the face of manipulation, you're not just protecting yourself, you're giving the manipulator an opportunity to develop healthier ways of relating to others. You're refusing to enable their dysfunction while allowing the natural consequences of their behavior to teach them what words never could. When someone is spreading negativity and drama, we all know people who seem to thrive on drama, who always have some crisis or conflict going on, who can't seem to have a conversation without complaining, gossiping, or stirring up trouble. These people can be exhausting to be around, and your first instinct might be to try to help them see how negative they're being, to encourage them to focus on the positive, to try to fix their problems. But Jung understood something profound about negative people. They're often addicted to their own misery. He said, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. In other words, some people choose to remain stuck in patterns of negativity because it feels safer than facing the real sources of their pain. When you try to argue with chronically negative people, when you try to point out the positive aspects of their situation, when you try to solve their problems for them, you're actually enabling their addiction to drama. You're giving them the attention and energy they're seeking, even if that attention comes in the form of trying to help. The most powerful thing you can do with negative, drama-prone people is to simply not participate. Don't argue with their negativity, but don't feed it either. Stay silent, change the subject, remove yourself from the conversation or the situation entirely. This approach allows karma to work in a very specific way. Negative people need an audience. For their drama, they need people to react to their complaints, to get involved in their conflicts, to validate their victim stories. When you don't provide that audience, when you don't give them the energy they're seeking, they're forced to confront the emptiness beneath their negativity. Some of the most dramatic people I've known have eventually found themselves completely alone, not because people don't care about them, but because people get tired of being drained by constant negativity. They've pushed away everyone who might have been a genuine friend or support system. But here's the interesting thing. When negative people can no longer get attention through drama, they sometimes, not always, but sometimes are forced to find healthier ways to connect with others. They might actually start to address the real issues underlying their negativity. They might begin to take responsibility for their own happiness instead of expecting others to manage their emotions for them. Your silence in these situations isn't cruel or uncaring. It's actually one of the most loving things you can do because it refuses to enable destructive patterns while creating space for growth and change. When someone attempts to publicly humiliate or embarrass you, this final situation is perhaps the most challenging because it attacks not just your private sense of self, but your public reputation and social standing. Whether it's someone calling you out in a meeting, making fun of you in front of others, sharing embarrassing information about you publicly, or otherwise trying to humiliate you, the desire to defend yourself is overwhelming. Jung understood public humiliation is a shadow projection. He said, thinking is difficult, therefore let the herd pronounce judgment. The person trying to humiliate you is often projecting their own shame, their own fear of being exposed, their own insecurities onto you. They're trying to make you feel small because they feel small themselves. When someone tries to humiliate you publicly, your instinct is to fight back, to defend yourself, to expose their flaws in return. But Jung would say that this reaction, while natural, actually diminishes you in the eyes of others. It brings you down to their level. It makes you part of the drama rather than rising above it. When you stay silent in the face of attempted public humiliation, several powerful things happen. First, you maintain your dignity. You show that you're secure enough in yourself that you don't need to engage in petty conflicts. You demonstrate emotional maturity and self-control. Second, you allow others to see the situation clearly. When you don't react defensively, people can see the attempted humiliation for what it really is, a desperate attempt by someone to make themselves feel better by making you feel worse. The aggressor's behavior stands out in stark contrast to your composed response. Third, you force the person attempting the humiliation to escalate or back down, and either choice makes them look bad. If they escalate, they look increasingly unhinged and desperate. If they back down, they look weak and foolish for having started something they couldn't finish. But the real karma comes in the long-term consequences. People who regularly try to to humiliate others develop a reputation for being cruel, petty, and insecure. Others begin to avoid them, not wanting to become their next target. They lose respect and social standing, often becoming exactly what they were trying to make you appear to be, someone who is embarrassing to be around. I've watched workplace bullies eventually find themselves isolated and overlooked for promotions, because nobody wants to work with someone who might turn on them at any moment. I've seen social media trolls find themselves blocked and ignored by increasingly larger circles of people. The very reputation they were trying to damage in others becomes their own reality. Jung believed that the psyche has an inherent drive toward wholeness and healing. When you don't react to attempted humiliation, when you stay centered and dignified, you're not just protecting yourself, you're modeling a higher way of being. You're showing others that it's possible to maintain your integrity, even when others are trying to tear you down. The deeper wisdom of silence throughout all of these situations. There's a deeper wisdom at work that Jung understood better than perhaps anyone else. He said, "Your vision becomes clear when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks within, awakens." When we react impulsively to others' harmful behavior, when we feel compelled to defend, attack, or retaliate, we're looking outside ourselves for solutions. We're giving our power away to others. We're allowing their actions to determine our responses, their energy to dictate our energy. But when we choose silence, when we step back and allow karma to work, we're turning inward. We're accessing our own inner wisdom, our own sense of what's right and true. We're trusting in something larger than our immediate, emotional reactions. This doesn't mean being passive or allowing ourselves to be walked on. It means understanding that there are times when the most powerful action is non-action, when the most devastating response is no response, when the most profound strength is demonstrated through restraint. Jung understood that the universe has its own intelligence, its own way of balancing things out. When we try to force justice through our own actions, we often create more imbalance, more harm, more chaos. But when we step back and trust in the natural order of things, we allow that intelligence to work through us and around us. The people who have wronged you, who have tried to hurt you, who have acted from their shadow side, they're carrying the seeds of their own correction within them. Your job isn't to plant those seeds or to force them to grow. Your job is to step out of the way and allow the natural consequences of their actions to unfold. This is perhaps the deepest wisdom that Jung offers us, that we are all part of a larger whole, a collective consciousness that is constantly working to balance itself, to heal itself, to grow toward greater wholeness and integration. When we align ourselves with this natural process rather than fighting against it, we become part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, betray you, manipulate you, or harm you in any way, remember Jung's wisdom. Remember that silence isn't weakness, it's strength. Patience isn't passivity, it's power. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others is to step back and let karma handle it. Trust in the process. Trust in the wisdom of the universe. Trust that what goes around comes around, and that justice, real justice, doesn't need your help to manifest. It just needs your willingness to get out of the way and let it work.